Hello everybody, Ollie here with some more philosophy reading recommendations out of the pile of the last few books I read. So here's a book I finished yesterday. It's called The Master and His Emissary by Ian McGilchrist. It's about neuroscience and the way that the brain, you probably know, is divided into two hemispheres. It's about what the two hemispheres do and also the impact that that division has had on the development of Western culture specifically. McGilchrist is trying to write a book about neuroscience, about history, about politics, about art history, about economics, about psychology. I think he's bitten off more than he can chew. Especially when he tries to talk about how the division of the brain has impacted philosophy, because his reading of Descartes is just totally wrong. Like it's almost like he didn't read Beyond Meditation 1 in Descartes, and his reading of Marx as well is like it's really bad. It's like he's read the Wikipedia article on Marx and hasn't actually read any of his work. And that's quite frustrating because there are some pages where you think, oh man, that's a really good idea, that's a really cool thought, I like that, and then you turn the page and then there's just, he's made some ridiculous mistake, or he's just suddenly assumed something absolutely massive without proving it, or then in the conclusion just some like weird Orientalism that just comes out of nowhere. So it's frustrating because the bits of it that are bad undermine the bits of it that are good, and also there are points when I know he's wrong about stuff and I'm like, well, if you've gotten that wrong, how do I know that what you've said elsewhere that I liked is true? If you're interested in philosophy and interested in learning things that are definitely true, I don't think I can really recommend this one. Total opposite, Culture and Imperialism by Edward Said. This one is absolutely dynamite, and like I said, it's the total opposite because he's trying to do more than one thing. He's trying to say, here's a work of art, history, and politics combined, and it works so well. He starts off saying this is a work of comparative literature. We're going to talk about the works of Jane Austen, Charles Dickens, Albert Camus, and Kipling, just to name a few of the people he touches on. And he says, we're going to look at how the context of imperialism informed what they wrote. Dickens, Austen, Camus, and Kipling were all writing at times when their countries were practicing serious imperialism. Like Kipling was writing when the British were still occupying India, Camus wrote when the French were still occupying Algeria, Austen was writing when people still had slaves, and he's saying, look, the artistic and cultural productions of a society aren't divorced from the socio-political context of imperialism and colonialism. They're part of it. The world that produced imperialism and colonialism is the same world that produced all these cultural milestones and novels and writings and works of art too. And we can explore the one through the other. Examining these works for themes of imperialism and domination and racism isn't to say that they're bad or that they should be thrown out. On the contrary, he says, it's good that we read them with this in mind because we acknowledge their limitations and we can imagine writing works of art right now that transcend those limitations. So he's examining the mindset behind imperialism and racism by looking at the culture that it produces. And on the flip side, he's also looking at the culture that anti-imperialism produces. He's looking at very nationalistic, Islamic fundamentalist ideas and saying, no, look, that's a response because when, for instance, the French pull out of Algeria, finally, after occupying it, the Algerians go, they say, okay, let's go back to an old traditional style of living, and that's where you get a reassertion of Islamic fundamentalism and very, very aggressive nationalism. So it's absolutely fascinating as a political and a socio-political and a historical book, as well as a work of art history. Really cannot recommend this one thoroughly enough. This isn't really a philosophy book, it's just something I'm happy about reading. I got Art is Dead, which is the Asdaf book by TomSka and Matt Ley. I finally got my hands on a copy of it at Summer in the City, the big YouTube convention that happened in the UK, and I finally got him to sign it as well. Look, I got Tom to sign it, and I got Matt to sign it, and Matt wrote Ollie is A-OK. It's not a philosophy book, I'm just really happy now that I own this and that I've got them to sign it. Speaking of Algeria and French colonialism, the last text I have to recommend to you is Frantz Fanon's essay Unveiling Algeria, which I read as a digital copy, and I read that this morning. This essay rose to the top of my reading list when the news broke that armed French police are forcing women to strip in public at the moment in Nice because of worries that they might be wearing non-secular clothing. For those of you who are unaware of the context of this essay, France invaded Algeria in 1830, I think, and they occupied it for 132 years, and Algeria finally won its independence following quite a bloody revolution in 1962. During the revolution, and for a long period before, the French occupying forces did not approve of the fact that Algerian women sometimes chose to wear veils. And Algerian women were encouraged, sometimes subtly and sometimes through force, to take off their veils. And Fanon details the ways in which this became part of the revolution against the French as well, in which some Algerian women actually joined the revolutionary guerrilla forces by concealing weapons under their veils, or by wearing it just as a symbol of resistance, or by taking it off because they were worried that they were going to be killed for continuing to wear it, and then that became a symbol, and people sympathized with them and felt that grief and joined the resistance themselves. So the role of the veil in the Algerian Revolution is the topic of Fanon's essay. Reading it, I was very reminded of Sherene Razack's book, Casting Out, The Eviction of Muslims from Western Law and Politics. Razack has a fantastic section on the veil and the way in which, as in Algeria, it's sometimes used as a cultural battleground. It's a way of, in Algeria, and the warning is more widely, it's a way of turning the bodies of Muslim women into battleground. The body of the Muslim woman, particularly if she chooses to wear a veil, can be used to justify surveillance and violence against Muslim men. And of course, when you read this essay from Frantz Fanon alongside Razack, you see that that is a colonialist and an imperialist attitude, to view a woman wearing a veil as inherently oppressed, and therefore think that liberation consists in telling her to take it off for her own good. What Razack reminds us in her book is that Muslim women wear veils for all sorts of reasons. Sometimes it's an act of religious devotion, sometimes it's a socio-political statement against imperialism, sometimes it's a communion with family tradition, or a whole host of other reasons that are, socio-politically speaking, none of our fucking business. And Razack has fantastic sections on the way that feminism and also national policies that fail to respect Muslim women's agency in wearing veils just aren't worth shit. So a very timely and worrying message from Fanon that those who fail to learn from history are doomed to repeat it. Those are the last few books I read. I hope you can find some interesting topics there to supplement your own reading lists. Keep reading, keep being curious, keep devouring as much text as you can, because, you know, especially things like Fanon and Said, the world needs people who have read the theory. Patreon.com/philosophytube is the place to go if you want to support the show. Sadly, these books and so on aren't free, but I'm trying to give away free education on YouTube. Anything you could do to help that would be very much appreciated. And for more philosophical videos, don't forget to subscribe.